This is Jennifer Green from Property House. I am joined by Gabe Ruffalo, of Short Sale Specialists in Wisconsin. I am out of the Twin Cities. Property House helps folks in need for selling their homes. If they need to see it sell quickly, if they're looking to sell off market, non-traditional ways, we are here to help you. What I really wanted to talk about today, because I've seen some posts out there of, some bigger names filing for bankruptcy. This discussion isn't meant to cause panic or incite fear. It's more or less just about garnering some support for you all in understanding bankruptcy and understanding what your options are. Because there are many types of bankruptcy as well, Gabe and I are going to be talking about that, what that means, a good way to be able to save your home if you need to file for bankruptcy, if you're not able to save it, what the steps are for that, and we'll go through all of that with you. Just as a reminder, all of the information that we talk about is always shared on our website at www.propertyhousepartners.com. And then also all of these lives are shared and uploaded onto our YouTube channel, Property House Partners, and then also available on our video library on our website. So if you're not able to join us live, you can always go back there for the recorded video. So Gabe, why don't you do a short introduction of yourself, and then we can, get into discussing what we're going to talk about.
Sure. My name's Gabe Ruffalo. I have a company, as Jen said, Short Sale Specialist. I help homeowners that are facing foreclosure. I work out options with the bank for them to sell their house for less than what they owe. And we always get the deficiency waived on all the short sales that we do. I negotiate in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Missouri, Illinois, all over the place. And I used to work at a large bank, and I used to work for Chase Bank, as a matter of fact, for about 5 years. So I know the ins and outs of the short sale business. Sometimes we do have people that are in active bankruptcy or are planning to file bankruptcy. And by no means are we lawyers, and we're not giving you legal advice and telling you what to do. But if you are in that situation, you still can do a short sale, and we'll go through all of that on the call.
Perfect. All right. So just to kind of start off, and when we say bankruptcy, that obviously is kind of more or less an obtuse term, right? We've got Chapter 7, there's Chapter 11, and Chapter 13. So why don't you explain a little bit, Gabe, what the difference is between the three, and then typically when somebody is, struggling with their finances, of what they would file to kind of restructure things if they wanted to save their home in bankruptcy.
Okay. There is a Chapter 7. Basically, the easiest way to explain a Chapter 7 is that you write off all your debts. You include all the debts that you have, and they're all written off. Through this process, a lot of people believe that when they do file this Chapter 7 and they include their house, that they no longer own the house. That is not correct. You still own the house. When you sign your note in your mortgage, you are still the owner, and the lender still has to go through the legal process to obtain the property back from you. The only thing that filing bankruptcy does is the bank can't call you and demand payment on that debt. So let's take Chapter 7. You want to file a Chapter 7. You write off everything. Usually that process from filing until the time it's done is about 90 days. You go in there, you file, you name all your creditors, you petition the court with an attorney, or you can do it by yourself. And then the judge will grant you permission to proceed with the bankruptcy. Then they have to notify all the creditors, and that once that's done and everybody agrees, your bankruptcy is discharged. Now, when you're at Chapter 7, you cannot do a short sale. You have to wait for it to actually be discharged from the courts. You'll get paperwork from the courts saying it is discharged.
How long does that typically take, Gabe, would you say?
From filing until the time it's done, it can be done as soon as 90 days. But I mean, if there's some filing and some waiting periods that are going on, it could go up to 4 months, but it's
Okay.
probably the simplest and easiest bankruptcy out there.
Would you say that a lot of the times in Chapter 7 bankruptcy that people have to sell their home because it's considered an asset in order to pay back the debts?
No, they don't. They don't have to sell their home. That's their choice. They can choose to do that. But if they're behind, the bank's still going to try. They're just not going to call you, but they're going to take action to obtain that property back from you. So it is, I mean, if you're struggling, you can't make your house payment, you can't make credit card payments, car payments, whatever they are, it is a very good option if you have no financial resources to bring that loan current again after it. Because there is something, you could reaffirm the debt is what it's called. And then you could make a payment, get caught up. Most people that are in that situation don't have that option, or they don't have somebody that's willing to bail them out. So if they can't keep their house, they need to do a short sale, because after this bankruptcy, it could drag out for another 2 years. And now you have this hanging over your head for the next 2 years. And the bank's not calling you, but they're still sending you letters saying that they're going to foreclose on your house. So any work that you did to try to get rid of the debt that you had, you're sort of taking a couple steps backwards, because they are going to foreclose on you. And then you've wasted 2 years of trying to rebuild your credit and be ready to possibly buy a house after this.
Okay. So do you think it's hard for people? I mean, because sometimes, I hear from a lot of homeowners, they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to file bankruptcy. Is there, I mean, and there's obviously a process that goes into filing bankruptcy. Do you think it's pretty easy to get approved for bankruptcy, or is it a little bit tougher?
I think it's probably pretty easy as long as you can prove what debt you have and where you're at. I don't think it's hard. I mean, you can file bankruptcy every 10 years if you want. Those are just the laws. But if you're going to file it and do it and you can't keep your house, I mean, my best advice is do a short sale, and just relieve that stress, get it off. It's another thing that's taken care of. If you do a short sale, you probably can buy a house within 2 to 3 years. The interest rate may be higher. The money that you have to put down may be higher. I know there are some lenders out there before all this COVID stuff went on that were, you could file bankruptcy and get a home loan the next day. You'd probably have to have 20% down. You're probably paying 11% interest, but if you have that option and you need somewhere to live, that is an option that you could explore. And then the lenders usually say, as long as you have a 1-year payment, you can refinance out of that loan for a lower interest rate.
Okay. So, I mean, that's, chapter 7, but obviously there's chapter 11 and then there's also chapter 13. So,
Okay.
and obviously the 7 was getting rid of all debt. 11, I know, is typically for restructuring business debt, more or less, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's more of a corporate kind of bankruptcy that you'll see large firms. One lender that tried to do it was Ditech. They used to be a mortgage lender and a mortgage servicer. They filed Chapter 11. My wife used to work at AT&T. Probably about 5 to 7 years ago, they did Chapter 11. It's more for a big corporation. So you don't see too many of those when you're in our type of business, trying to help the average homeowner out. And we're not large companies, and we're not affiliated with the government. We make no guarantees that we can get your short sale done or that we can help you out of the situation. It's all on a case-by-case basis, but we'll always be upfront and let you know where we're coming from and what we've seen happen in the past from our experience.
Okay. So then the other one, obviously, that homeowner can use is chapter 13, and that's really more about restructuring debt.
Correct. Basically, you enter into a plan, usually it's a 5-year period, where you'll pay your creditors off in a period of 5 years. You're making one payment. You file the bankruptcy, you're assigned what's known as a trustee. All your payments are going to be made to that trustee, and then they're going to be distributed out to the various creditors. What happens is, in that case, when you're doing a short sale, you're going to need to still provide all your financial paperwork. You're going to go through the same short sale process as you would on a Chapter 7. Once we do get an approval for a short sale, we still have to send all those documents to the trustee, and he has to take them to the court, and the court has to sign off allowing you to do the short sale.
Okay.
Because you're not getting any proceeds from the short sale, and it's not affecting how the repayment plan was structured. So that's why the trustee needs to petition the court and have a judge sign off and say it's okay.
Okay. So when it comes to that, what I've always understood sometimes too is that you still have to be making your mortgage payment during that time, or at least once it's restructured. So then you'll maybe have your mortgage payment, and then you're also paying on top of, what it was owed in back pay. Is that true with the trustee?
But with the trustee, it all depends how it's structured and what debts you do include in there for creditors. Because you can still have a Chapter 13. You don't include your mortgage in there, and then you don't make your mortgage payment. So those are things that can happen. Because most of the times they may be named as a creditor, but people aren't paying that, from what I see.
Okay. So, a lot of the times when I meet with homeowners, and I'm sure you guys as well, they'll say, oh, well, I'm just going to file Chapter 13 so I don't lose my house. Right. And I know that's something that sometimes folks do and sometimes folks don't. So where do you feel like the fine line is when people say, and like what the best advice would be if someone says, oh, I'm just going to file Chapter 13 so I can save my house?
Well, here's the thing. Any type of bankruptcy is going to halt the foreclosure option. Okay. All it's going to do is we're not going to contact you. We're not going to demand payment on that debt. It does stop it, but even if they file it, they still have to go through with this plan, and it still has to be approved, and they still have to make the other payments. Otherwise it kicks out, and then they don't have that protection from the bankruptcy anymore. So
what you're saying is if somebody misses a payment, that pretty much then, does that ruin their chance for bankruptcy or ruin their chance from keeping their home? If, let's say, another hardship comes up in that time, what happens?
I would say it ruins their chance at bankruptcy because it gets thrown out. Now they have to refile because they have, defaulted on yet another payment. So they cannot really, they'll have to reapply.
Okay. Because, I've worked with some folks, and I know you have too, where, they're like, oh, well, I really haven't paid for a while, on my mortgage, but I'm still in my home. I've filed bankruptcy. I've postponed it this way. I mean, there are some people that I've worked with that have, not paid their mortgage for a really long time and have been going through these restructuring and loan modifications for, almost 10, 15, in some cases, one person was 20 years really. And unfortunately she did end up in foreclosure. But how does all of that, is that bankruptcy, is that loan modifications? Like, how does all of that kind of work together?
They really don't. I mean, you're working with large banks. I mean, you have a bankruptcy department, you have a foreclosure department, you have a modification department, you have a short sale department. In a lot of cases, there's just one big, huge system, or each department may have separate systems that they look at for when they reach out to people. And the notes might not be reflected to the short sale person, to the foreclosure person, to the bankruptcy person. So there's a lot of confusion with these banks and how they actually operate. I can give you an experience. I could be working a short sale and I could almost have an approval, but then the modification department's still sending the homeowner a package out. Why don't you do a modification? Why don't you do a modification? They never realized that the person was actually pursuing a short sale. So there's a lot of disconnect with these major, huge banks. If you're dealing with, First Bank and Trust of Minneapolis or something like that, that might be a small bank, or a credit union, it's usually just a couple people that handle these. So there would be less confusion in that situation.
So more or less what it sounds like is that these different departments kind of work in individual silos and don't necessarily speak to each other often or know what one, place is doing versus the other. Is that true?
Sure, that's totally true. I mean, I was working short sales in Milwaukee and Chase had their bankruptcy department down in Texas. I never knew who the person was. All I could do was, possibly pick up a phone call. Modification. We did have some people that worked modification a couple floors up, but I never saw them when I worked at Chase. So it's just all over the place when it comes to these large banks and trying to deal with them. And you could call in 10 different times and get 10 different answers because you don't know if you're in the right department. You could have somebody that customer service that really doesn't know or is familiar with your situation that may give you some wrong advice.
Okay. So if somebody wanted to, let's say, work a short sale, and let's just say chapter 13, and we don't have to wait for the discharge of chapter 7. Somebody files chapter 13 and know that they're not going to be able to necessarily have that house, keep their house. What is the, what's the paperwork that they have to put together and the things that they should know, if they were looking to, let's say, for instance, short sale?
Well, first thing I'd want to do is obviously we need a listing contract, an offer. We getting a title company involved to get a settlement statement or a HUD statement. That's nothing that the homeowner would worry about. But for the homeowner, they need to get pay stubs, the last month's worth. If they're paid every week, 4 of them, every other week, 2 of them. I need 3 months worth of bank statements. I would need a form filled out. It's called an RMA, which is a request for mortgage assistance, or a UBAF, which is a uniform borrower's assistance form. It all depends on what type of loan that you have, what type of form you need to fill out. I would need them to have their last 2 years of federal tax returns. If they're copies, sign the copies, date the copies. Hardship letter, what caused them to fall behind on their mortgage, whether it be job loss, whether it be death of a spouse, whether it be divorce, medical issues, anything that may have affected them not being able to pay the mortgage. And then I would also need a copy of their mortgage statement if they have one, if they're still receiving it, because after a while, if you fall so far behind, the lenders won't even send you mortgage statements out anymore. And then
third-party authorization.
Third-party authorization, yep. And I think that's about it.
Yeah. So that's obviously that's a lot of stuff, right?
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it is. That was very good. Good memorization. But I guess my other thing is, so, we've kind of gone down that path of saying, like, these are the things, if you have to sell, I also want to be on that other side of things, is that, bankruptcy can also save somebody more or less from going into that foreclosure situation as well, right? And
Yep.
So in terms of folks being able to be on task and keep their homes, what you're more or less saying is, in chapter 13 at least, that they'll get that agent that restructures all of their debt, and then they're paying that trustee. Is it just more or less based upon them being sure to make those payments to that trustee?
Yes.
To keep them on target? And just a couple on that, like, what happens then if, let's say 6 months down the road, something else happens? Are they allowed to negotiate again, kind of what that payment is with the trustee? Do they keep in contact with them, or what happens after that?
I mean, the biggest thing is always be in contact with somebody, because those people are there to help. I mean, even if you're contemplating filing bankruptcy and you haven't done so yet, and you do have a mortgage, call your bank, talk to them. Don't avoid the phone calls. You have a situation. The worst thing you can do is try to avoid the situation. You need to get out there and deal with people that are experienced, that are willing to help you, that have done this for thousands of people before and understand the process. A lot of people are ashamed when it comes to it. And, you know, some of these things are unavoidable, some of these hardships that people go through. I mean, nobody ever goes through planning on how do I not pay my mortgage, or how, you know, what happens if I file bankruptcy? How does that affect me? You know, reach out to the people that are there to help. And like Jen, she's there to help a homeowner. She's willing to answer any questions you may have, as well as I am. And if we don't know the answers, we'll go and search for them on your behalf, because we're there to help. So my biggest advice is always don't, the bank's going to send you letters. The bank's going to give you calls. Talk to them. They're not trying to be the bad guy. It's just following through and doing the steps to help you. And if you want to save your house, make sure you're clear with, when you meet with that bankruptcy attorney, I want to keep my house. What can I do to keep my house? I just have these other debts, or I need to restructure these other debts that will allow me to do that.
Okay. So, I mean, there's definitely light, you know, at the end of the tunnel when there is bankruptcy. You know, I wanted to just more or less, I guess, talk about this today with you, because you've obviously dealt with it quite a bit. And to be honest, we've been getting a lot of phone calls of folks, you know, asking about what if I, you know, I may have to file bankruptcy after this, you know, this pandemic passes. And, you know, a lot of folks we're seeing, you know, small business especially are not getting, you know, their loans approved, or it's going to bigger businesses. And so something to really think about, obviously, is now is really kind of the time to set up that plan and understand what the best option is going to be. Obviously, things change, you know, day by day, but really knowing, you know, what those options are. And that's why I wanted to bring on Gabe today, was because he's dealt with this a ton. I've dealt with it a ton. And we really just wanted to provide good information and content for you folks, so that if there is something set in place and you think that, you know, perhaps I may have to file bankruptcy at the end of this, that there is a way to save your home. And if not, there are other ways out besides foreclosure. And so, Gabe, do you feel like, just our last parting words, because we're about out of time, I just wanted to see if you had any last, you know, recommendations for people, or last points of advice before we leave?
Yep. Okay. If you're gonna go down that road and file bankruptcy, there are some questions you need to ask this bankruptcy attorney. When you file, you have all your debts included in there. You need to ask them, are they filing satisfactions with all these creditors once my bankruptcy is over? Usually, from what I see, because I pull a title, and there's stuff that's included in the bankruptcy that does still show up on title. So then they should have either filed a satisfaction or mailed you the satisfactions from the court. And a lot of people miss that. So that's one question I would ask them, because you're paying them to do a job, and they may tell you it costs, you know, $100 per file. I don't know. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what they charge to file a satisfaction, but all it is a piece of paper that goes to your local courthouse that says, yes, this debt was discharged in the bankruptcy. I would also caution people when attorneys say, don't worry about your house. You still have to worry, because the lender still has certain rights under the note, and it is enforceable, and they still can foreclose on your property. Those are just some quick tips when you're talking to a possible attorney about filing bankruptcy.
Perfect. Thanks, Gabe. And thank all of you for joining us today. Remember that this live stream will be available on our YouTube channel, Property House Partners, or also on our website, www.propertyhousepartners.com. Obviously, also available on my feed as well. We hope that you got some really good information today. Also, if you're looking for more information or would just like to talk about this a bit more, you can always call into our office. Our general line is 612-234-2476. We're here to help in whatever way we can. We are also still deemed an essential business, so we are going out and visiting people and still having an appointment, still seeing homes, still buying homes, to make it as easy as possible. So whenever excuse that, thanks, Kellen. hold on a second. So if you need help, please give us a call. The joys of working at home right now, right?
Hi, Dad.
Oh, the joys. Anyway, so thanks for joining us. I will see you guys on Thursday. I'm going to be speaking with one of my general contractors, Brian Zabrock of Aspire Builders. We're going to be talking about what construction looks like right now, city permits, approvals, working 6 feet away from each other, and just how everything in construction is working right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, thanks for joining us, and we will see you on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.